Hello, and welcome to Lake County SWCD's presentation on Minnesota mussels, in which we will introduce you to some of our most unassuming and perhaps underrated of wildlife species here in Minnesota. Native freshwater mussels in Minnesota prefer streams and rivers or lakes with a current to bring them food and oxygen and remove waste. Mussels are able to bury themselves entirely beneath the substrate and have only their siphons extended out into the water. That way they're able to intake their food and oxygen and eliminate waste while also being able to evade predation. They filter plankton and other organic matter from the water to eat. Because of this, they're sensitive to changes in the environment and therefore considered an indicator species. Indicator species let us know when there's an issue in their environment. Because they're sensitive to even small amounts of disturbance, the species' presence or absence indicates even subtle changes. Mussels are food for muskrats, raccoons, and some fish. And in Minnesota, we have 50 native species of mussels. 28 of them are considered threatened, endangered, or of special concern. Mussels are a variety of bivalve mollusk. Valve refers to the shell, so bivalve means two shell. Some features of their anatomy include two adductor muscles to open and close the shell, a muscular foot to move them around, in-current and ex-current siphons to take in food and oxygen and eliminate waste, and gills for breathing, as well as catching food particles. Mussels start their life as microscopic glochidia, larval mussels that parasitize a host fish, but a fair amount of serendipity is necessary for them to come into being. A male will release his sperm into the water, and if a female is nearby, she will take it in to fertilize her eggs. Many mussels have a feature on their shell or their mantle that resembles a minnow or other tasty morsel to lure the fish near enough for thousands of glochidia released to latch onto. Some mussels even require a specific species of fish as a host. Once the glochidia can survive on their own, they leave their host to forge their own path. Similar to trees, mussels can be aged by counting their rings. Older mussels can be difficult to age accurately because as they grow older, each new ring is closer and closer to the last. So it's hard to see where one begins and the other ends. This is a list of native Minnesota mussel species. Common names were often given based on their appearance, which is how we get such creative names as wartyback, elephant ear, snuffbox, pistol grip, and fat pocketbook. The names are listed based on species classifications, which are legal designations of their protection status. Extirpated means that they no longer exist in portions of their historic range. The one extirpated species in the state of Minnesota is the scale shell, as you see at the bottom right. Lake County contains one species of special concern, which is the creek heel splitter. Historically in Minnesota, indigenous peoples used mussels for food, tools, currency, and jewelry. Then in the late 1800s, mussels were harvested in a large commercial operation in which large amounts of mussels were taken for the manufacture of buttons as well as culturing pearls. That overharvest, in addition to later pollution, have led to declines in mussel populations. Currently in Minnesota, no harvesting of mussels from inland waters is allowed, and limited commercial harvest of one species is allowed from the Mississippi where it borders with Wisconsin. This requires a special permit. Populations of native mussels are believed to still be suffering from the overharvesting in the late 1800s. Today, other threats are hindering their recovery. Those include commercial harvest, runoff of sediment and chemicals from industrial, agricultural, and residential sources, as those mussels are so sensitive to those changes. disruption to the flow of water, including dams and channelization, and introduction of invasive species, particularly zebra mussels. Let's talk a little bit about invasive species. What are invasive species? Well, native species are plants and animals that are indigenous to a particular area. Non-native species are plants and animals that are not native to a particular area. Invasive species are non-native species that cause damage to the economy, the environment, or human health once established, which is about 10% of non-native species. So why are invasive species bad? Invasive species decrease biodiversity, or variety of species in an area. Displace native habitats, causing problems for plants and wildlife that require certain habitats. Reduce recreational opportunities by damaging equipment, being a nuisance, limiting movement, or causing a hazard. Change the food chain, affecting anything that relies on native plants and animals as a food source. Decreases property value, and has the potential to spread disease, increase allergies, and irritations. As previously mentioned, zebra mussels pose a major threat to native mussel species. They're an invasive species that came to the U.S. from the Caspian Sea region in ballast water of ocean-going ships in the 1980s. They were first found in Minnesota in 1989 in Duluth Harbor. Like native mussels, they are filter feeders. In fact, adult mussels can filter up to 1 liter of water per day, meaning they can completely restructure food webs in lakes by removing plankton and reducing food for native species. They are a nuisance to watercraft owners, can cause damage to equipment in the water, and are hazardous to recreation. Together, zebra and quagga, another invasive mussel, can cause as much as $1 billion in damage to the U.S. economy yearly. Keys to the identification of zebra mussels are the thumbnail size. They're typically under 1 inch. They can be up to 2 as an adult. And they are very, very small as veligers, which is what their larva is called. They're generally black to brownish, and they have a D-shaped shell with a zebra-like dark and light stripe. Their shell may stand upright on one side. Usually they're found in clusters of individuals on hard surfaces, unlike native mussels, which are usually on softer surfaces. They also have these byssal threads, which are like hairs, at the valve, which can help attach to hard surfaces. Native mussels do not have these byssal threads. You can help. Zebra mussels would love to hitch a ride on your boat or water-related equipment. They can be transported when attached to plant fragments left on boats or trailers, or as veligers free floating in water left in live wells or bait buckets, or by attaching directly to boats and gear. You can prevent the spread of invasive species by cleaning your boat or water-related equipment, draining all water, drying your equipment, and disposing of unused bait. You can visit dnr.state.mn.us/AIS for more information and to learn about the Minnesota regulations. Much of what we know about the status of native mussels comes from studies done by state natural resource professionals. In 1999, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources started their first ever statewide survey of mussels. Each of those red dots on the state of Minnesota is a survey site that they visited. It was found that many of the mussels in southern Minnesota have been extirpated from their historic watersheds. The DNR's Center for Aquatic Mollusk Programs, CAMP, is working to reintroduce native mussels to their historic ranges and improve their chances for survival. If you're excited to get out there and get involved with collecting data too, there are several ways you can contribute to the collective knowledge about native and invasive mussels. First, what you want to do is find out what invasive species are near you. One way to do this is to visit edmaps.org/Midwest, and there you can search for different species on their map. If you have shoreline property, you can make a zebra mussel settlement sampler and hang it from your dock. If zebra mussels are present, they may settle on the sampler and attach to the plates. You can do a shoreline survey of a nearby lake or stream. You can report those findings of native mussels on the iNaturalist app. That's an app for your phone that's available wherever you can get your apps. You can report suspected invasive species findings to the Minnesota DNR, your area SWCD, and Great Lakes Early Detection Network. That's GLEDN. That's also an app that you can put on your phone. If you would like more guidance in how to conduct a shoreline survey, check back at the Lake County SWCD website soon, as we'll shortly be posting our AIS Sentry Field Guide for the public to use. Thank you for taking the time to learn about native and invasive mussels in Minnesota.